The inquiry's gone round in circles, to the frustration of Grenfell lawyers from the beginning.
Not a single core participant involved in the primary refurbishment of Grenfell Tower has felt able to make any unqualified admission against its own interests. No trace of any acceptance of any responsibility for what happened at Grenfell Tower, a merry-go-round of buck-passing.
So after 5 years' work, £150 million spent and 400 days of evidence, the inquiry has now come to an end. But as for accepting responsibility for what happened at Grenfell, this merry-go-round of buck-passing has kept spinning. As it sat for a final time, the blame game was mentioned again.
My metaphor may now have become rather worn, but for many, even now, the merry-go-round turns still. The notes of its melody clearly audible in the last few days.
The fire killed 72 people, and after all the evidence, it came to this damning conclusion.
That each and every one of the deaths that occurred in Grenfell Tower on the 14th of June 2017 was avoidable.
Eddie, can I speak to you then?
Yeah.
Can I get your name first?
My name's Eddie Daffan.
On the morning of the fire, we met a Grenfell survivor. Edward Daffan had just escaped from the 16th floor of the tower, holding on to a blanket and the threads of his life. Almost 5.5 years later, we met up again. Do you think the inquiry has been worth it?
You know, for me, what's really, really important is that we get the truth, that we get justice, and by that I mean the clink of handcuffs, and that the perpetrators, the people responsible for the killing of 72 innocent lives, face justice, go to jail. But, you know, along with that, we need change. We need, you know, there are still people sleeping in buildings with flammable cladding on. The people living in social housing are being mistreated as badly now as they were before the fire. And too little has changed.
Can I please have the presentation up on the screen, please?
As for who is responsible for Grenfell, the inquiry came up with this spiderweb of blame. From flammable cladding and insulation makers to architects, builders and contractors, all the way past the council and up to the government. Amongst this tangle, a rare admission of a mistake, the Department of Housing saying sorry for weak building regs.
For the department's failure to realise that the regulatory system was broken and it might lead to a catastrophe such as this, the department is truly sorry and apologises unreservedly.
You've spoken about another Grenfell being in the post. Do you think that's still the case?
Absolutely. I think that the government are playing a game of Russian roulette. I think it is pure luck that they've got away with it up until this point. And I think until every single building with flammable cladding has been remediated, that danger exists.
But the inquiry's work is not done. The long-awaited report with its recommendations is due sometime next year, 6 years after the fire.
All right, so we heard from one survivor there, Eddie, but do you think other survivors, bereaved families, for them, you know, all this time, all this money, do they think it's been worth it?
I think you can look at it both ways, one really positive and one really negative. The most pessimistic view, you can say it's been a complete waste of time and money. It's taken 6 years, £150 million, and historically, inquiry recommendations always get ignored by the government. So what was the point of it all? But more optimistically, on the other side of the spectrum, you can say the inquiry's already uncovered so many malpractices in the building industry and disregard to fire safety. So it might have already done its job. No one's buying a home with flammable cladding. No one wants to build one either. So the truth, I think, as always, is somewhere in the middle of that. But the recommendations will come sometime later next year.
All right, Rags, thank you.